Today's message is on the topic of how do we overcome the conflicts between the Christian faith and the antichristian world. Today's text is from Luke 12 verse 49 through 53. I have come to bring fire on the earth, and how I wish it were already kindled. But I have a baptism to undergo, and how distressed I am until it is completed. Do you think I came to bring peace on earth? No, I tell you, but division. From now on there will be 5 in one family divided against each other, 3 against 2 and 2 against 3. They will be divided, father against son and son against father, mother against daughter and daughter against mother, mother-in-law against daughter-in-law and daughter-in-law against mother-in-law. Jesus taught his disciples about the signs of the end times before his resurrection and ascension to heaven. And he promised to return to earth as judge at the end of time. But he said in Matthew 24 verse 36 that no one knows about that day or hour, not even the angels in heaven, nor the Son, but only the Father. Since then, as human history has progressed until now, whenever there has been a prolonged period of huge events, such as wars, pestilences, famines, natural disasters, etc., frail humans have thought, is this the end times? Today, however, proud humans are conducting various studies and collaborations with the idea that humans themselves can save humanity and the world with rapidly developing cutting-edge science and technology. There are many attempts at the highest level of transnational cooperation in recent history within international organizations to solve the problems of economic polarization, climate change. The threat of recurrent pandemics, population explosion, the resulting depletion of natural resources, environmental pollution, and even the possibility of an asteroid collision. One such organization is the World Economic Forum. It is also known as the Davos Forum because it is held in the small Swiss city of Davos. Here, influential leaders from the world's political, economic, socio-cultural, scientific, media, and other fields gather to discuss a set agenda. And the decided issues are passed on to the United Nations, where they are translated into concrete action plans and passed down to the member governments of UN, and global projects are underway that the general public is not aware of. If you type in the 2030 Agenda at Google, you will see a website that says that they will change the world through sustainable development by 2030, and you can get a lot of information in it. There are 17 global agendas of sustainable development. To name a few, they are ending poverty and hunger, gender equality, climate action, reducing inequality, sustainable cities and communities, and more. On the surface, the agendas appear very nice and hopeful for the future, but when you get into the specifics, you will find the absolute necessity of one world government that must unite the world, and the need for a strong governing authority to effectively implement these agendas around the world. The idea behind sustainable development is to change the world by developing in such a way that the global ecosystem is sustainable because it is not sustainable in its current state. The key question here is what level of development is sustainable point. And the extent and the level of development they aim for will enable us to know the identity of the world government and the limits of its authority. If the push is to turn this planet into a Garden of Eden-like paradise where humanity can live in extreme comfort, then that would be a very serious thing, as it would probably be attacked as a conspiracy theory, which is known all over the world these days, about creating a new world order centered on a small privileged powerful global elite through the Great Reset. But since there is no clear indices yet about the limits of sustainable development, we can only watch with concern at the moment. Nevertheless, common sense leads us to the conclusion that the rescue of our planet which is entering into an imminent ecological total crisis, and the sustainable development of our planet will require significant changes and control of the way of life of people around the world and technology to control it inevitably for ecological transformation. It is at this point that the awake saints will need to remember and pray for the end-time revelations in the books of Daniel and Revelation, and have the wisdom to prepare for the last pitch for the global mission, the rapture, and the 7-year tribulation. From a big-picture perspective, the 2030 Agenda is like the construction project of a modern-day Tower of Babel. The extreme fall of man in Noah's day brought God's wrath, resulting in a global reset of humanity and the global ecosystem through the judgment of the flood. After the flood, the Earth's ecosystem began again with the 8 members of Noah's family and male and female pair of all living creature preserved in the ark, but humans with sinful nature built the Tower of Babel to ensure that they would not be flooded again and scattered throughout the world. Genesis 11 verses 1 to 4. Now the whole world had one language and a common speech. As men moved eastward, they found a plain in Shinar and settled there. They said to each other, "Come, let's make bricks and bake them thoroughly." They used brick instead of stone, and tar for mortar. Then they said, "Come, let us build ourselves a city, with a tower that reaches to the heavens, so that we may make a name for ourselves and not be scattered over the face of the whole earth." But this meant that they ignored God's command to be fruitful, multiply, and replenish the earth, and in their own wisdom and pride, they built the Tower of Babel to stand God's judgment, the act of God, even if God judged them with another flood. It was a challenge to compete with God with so-called human collective intelligence. Later in the book of Revelation, the words Babylon the Great appear several times, and are interpreted as influential end-time metropolitans or nations that oppose God, apostatize, and promote unethical ideas, cultures, and fads, such as fornication and extravagance. Revelation 14:8b. Fallen. Fallen is Babylon the Great, which made all the nations drink the maddening wine of her adulteries. Rev. 18:2b. Fallen. Fallen is Babylon the Great. She has become a home for demons and a haunt for every evil spirit, a haunt for every unclean and detestable bird. Revelation 18 verses 15-18. The merchants who sold these things and gained their wealth from her will stand far off, terrified at her torment. They will weep and mourn and cry out, "Woe, O great city, dressed in fine linen, purple and scarlet, and glittering with gold, precious stones and pearls. In 1 hour such great wealth has been brought to ruin." Every sea captain, and all who travel by ship, the sailors, and all who earn their living from the sea, will stand far off. When they see the smoke of her burning, they will exclaim, "Was there ever a city like this great city?" Dear saints, will these warnings of the destruction of the great city of Babylon in the book of Revelation fall on the ears of the world in this age when we are building the modern Tower of Babel of the greatest civilization in human history with the man's highest scientific knowledge and technology, and even with AI technology? Perhaps even most of today's highly educated saints will not hear the warnings of Revelation unless they are spiritually awake. The truth is, no one knows when Jesus' return will be, next week, in a few months, in a few years, in a few decades, or even later. However, the soul-loving zeal of evangelists to evangelize even one more soul is marked by a sense of urgency that asks, what if that day is tomorrow? Which is why the prophecies of Revelation cannot be irresponsibly ignored. In the immediately preceding paragraph of Luke 12 verses 49-51, today's text, verses 35-48, Jesus teaches 3 parables about the attitude of the saints in preparing for his return. The first is the servant who watches and waits in case his master comes in the middle of the night. The second is the servant who, as a good steward, works wisely and faithfully at what God has entrusted to him, and the third is the servant who, knowing his master's will, prepares in advance and does the will of his master. Following these 3 parables, Jesus goes on to teach about the topic today, the conflict between Christian faith and the anti-Christian world in the end time. So the words in the 2 linked paragraphs are a teaching about what will happen in the world when Jesus returns, and they apply to the church today. So the words in the 2 linked paragraphs are a teaching about what will happen in the world when Jesus returns, and they apply to the church today. As I have consistently preached before, in this age of rationalism, humanism, and scientism, not only in the world but also in the church, to claim orthodox evangelicalism is always ridiculed, so it is a walking hard and lonely road. Especially in Korea, where the level of education and enthusiasm for education is the highest in the world, and the people are very conscious of what others think of them, there are many saints who try to hold on to the rational faith. Therefore, there are not many saints who hold on to the pure evangelical faith. Male saints tend to do so even more. They don't want to be seen as foolish and irrational saints. Jesus says in verse 49 of the text, "I have come to cast fire on the earth," and then in verse 51, "Do you think I came to bring peace on earth? No, I tell you, but rather division." From these words, we can easily see the disputes and conflicts that will inevitably arise between believers and unbelievers. What is the meaning of the fire that Jesus threw on the earth? It can be construed in many ways, but first, it can be said to be the gospel of Jesus' truth thrown into a world void of truth of life and full of sin. Romans 1 verse 17 says that in the gospel a righteousness from God is revealed. Righteousness of God reveals truth, holiness, and judgment. The gospel, then, is a fire that consumes iniquity by revealing the holy righteousness of God that judges the world. The powers of the earth that Satan and the forces of evil spirits have are stirred up and clash against the saints. As a result, the saints who faithfully believe the gospel of truth are mocked, despised, tribulated, and even persecuted by the world. But these disputes and conflicts start at the smallest unit of society, the family, and Jesus makes it clear in today's text, Luke 12 verses 52 to 53, that they begin at home. The writer of the Gospel of Matthew also records Jesus saying in Matthew 10 verses 35 to 36, "For I have come to turn a man against his father, a daughter against her mother, a daughter-in-law against her mother-in-law. A man's enemies will be the members of his own household." Man's enemies are his own family. Isn't that surprising? Do you always argue with people around you in your social life? Actually, seldom. But at home, you often argue with your family members over trivial matters, don't you? It was once revealed by someone who held a very high priestly position in a satanic church in the United States that Satan's strategy for destroying the church and its members is to destroy the family. The family is the smallest unit of human society, and its members should be closer and more loving than anyone else in the world, but the reality is that they are not, so Satan attacks the family first. Therefore, when the gospel of truth enters a family that is not harmonious, disputes and conflicts naturally emerge, which then expand into society outside of the family and develop into bigger disputes and quarrels between social groups. This is the work of the devil. The ruler of this world is Satan. Satan was an angel, Luciel, who served God, but he rebelled against God and fell to earth along with a third of the angels in heaven who followed him. The supporting idea that Satan, who fell to earth, has authority over this world is found in Luke 4 verses 5 to 7. This is what Satan said when he tempted Jesus in the wilderness. The devil led him up to a high place and showed him in an instant all the kingdoms of the world. And he said to him, "I will give you all their authority and splendor, for it has been given to me, and I can give it to anyone I want to. So if you worship me, it will all be yours." The claim of, "it has been given to me," in this verse is interpreted by theologians to mean that God has granted the authority. This is because in the Old Testament, when God was disciplining the rebellious Israelites, he often allowed evil spirits to do evil things. As I've preached before, when you believe in Jesus and are saved, you may experience initially good answers to your prayers and blessings, but at some point, you will enter a phase of sanctification, where you will be faced with difficulties and trials that are beyond your understanding and where you will be trained to grow in faith and spirit. We must recognize that most of the difficulties, trials, persecutions, etc., that we experience here are caused by the intervention of evil spirits. The saints must recognize that there are times when evil spirits enter through the gaps of our sins and trespasses, but there are also times when evil spirits attack us with God's permission. A good example of this is Job, the protagonist of the book of Job. Hearing the Western world news today, we wonder and doubt whether it's really true. Almost every day, we see stories being disseminated through various media outlets where powerful political group and its associated media twist lies into truth, and when the opposing group releases the truthful news, then it is deleted and blocked as fake news. Now, with AI technology, especially generative AI, we are living in an era where false information can be manipulated to look and sound like the real thing and deceive people. Indeed, the world is sinking deeper and deeper into muddle and chaos to the point where it is almost impossible to distinguish truth from untruth. I can't wait for Jesus to return soon enough. Because when Jesus returns, there will be a judgment that will ultimately separate the truth from the untruth, a judgment of sin, and then eternal peace and happiness will come to the saved saints. Therefore, the saints who have already experienced the gospel of truth through Jesus Christ must overcome the struggle against false truths and undertake the missionary task of spreading the truth to the ends of the earth. We the saints must also put on the full armor of God, which will prepare for all the hardships, persecutions and tribulations that we will face in the end times, and become saints who will not give in to the lies and untruths of the world. Matthew 10 verse 34 says, "Do not suppose that I have come to bring peace to the earth. I did not come to bring peace, but a sword." So far, We have interpreted the fire that Jesus cast on the earth in terms of the gospel of truth, but from another perspective, the fire can be understood as the hostility, disputes, and conflicts between believers and unbelievers that the gospel of truth has brought forth. The believer should not be afraid of the enmity that has been created with unbelievers. A saved believer should never fear the evil spirits working behind the scenes of unbelievers, because Jesus has already defeated Satan on the cross, and a believer with authority as a child of God should never fear the evil spirits working behind the scenes of unbelievers. On the contrary, believers are not to hate the unbelievers who oppose. Rather, we should ask the Lord to give us wisdom and ways to love them, contrary to our feelings. One thing we must never forget when battling the evil spirit is to never let our emotions guide us. We must be disciplined to go against our feelings and thoughts and so say and do the opposite, so that we may have the opportunity to save the lost spirits that are against us. Love conquers all things. Let us overcome the persecution that comes our way with forgiveness and love. In the end times, I recommend that you practice the kind of bold spiritual discipline that will allow you to take for granted that you will be ridiculed, criticized, threatened, persecuted, etc. Build your discipline to endure, overcome, forgive, and love from the smallest things. Work hard at it, first with your own family, then with your close friends, neighbors, and co-workers. Believe that saving one soul, which is more precious than all the world, from eternal death with the gospel of truth and love is the greatest opportunity for the saints to earn their heavenly reward. Finally, let me close today's message with the last 2 verses of the last chapter of the book of Malachi. Malachi 4 verses 5 to 6. Behold, I will send you the prophet Elijah before that great and dreadful day of the Lord comes. He will turn the hearts of the fathers to their children, and the hearts of the children to their fathers, or else I will come and strike the land with a curse. In the end times, Satan is desperate to break the smallest unit of human society, the family. Before the great and dreadful day of the Lord arrives, the day Jesus returns as judge, I strongly exhort you to build strong, loving families in which parents love their children and children honor their parents. May every home be a home of love and truth that triumphs over all the temptations and attacks of evil spirits and a fallen world in the last days. Amen. Hallelujah.